Podcast right now via telephone. Doug Wardlow. Doug is the Republican-endorsed candidate for Minnesota Attorney General. And if you're at all familiar with this particular office here in the state of Minnesota, a Republican inexplicably has not held this office since 1971. So I'll be 50 years old next year, and literally once in my lifetime have we had a Republican Attorney General, and it was very early in my lifetime. So it's been about 47 years and counting since we've last had a Republican Attorney General. Well, Doug Wardlow hopes to change all that, and there is reason for optimism this particular election. That is for certain. So joining us via telephone is the aforementioned Doug Wardlow. Doug, appreciate your flexibility today. How are you, sir?
Doing very well, Brad. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate you coming on, Doug. First and foremost, I haven't talked to you since last weekend, so congratulations receiving the party's endorsement for Attorney General. That has to be quite a thrill, Doug Wardlow.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It's really an honor to get the party's endorsement, and we had a lot of energy coming out of the convention, and heading towards the general election, things are looking very good.
Well, we definitely want to talk a little bit about obviously the general election, upcoming primary, and all that sort of thing. But for those listeners who are tuning in, obviously some, for better or for worse, may not pay as much attention to the statewide constitutional offices as they do, say, the governor's office, which, of course, is our top executive in the state. So maybe if you kind of give, I don't know, Doug, a 10,000-foot view of what the Attorney General is comprised of, or at least the the tasks you think the Attorney General should be undertaking, Doug Wardlow.
Well, absolutely. So the Attorney General is the top legal officer for the state and also the top law enforcement officer in the state. And it's really a vital office. There are nearly 200 attorneys that work for the Attorney General. And the Democrats, having held the office for going on 48 years now, they've really politicized the office, and they put politics above the rule of law. So some of the things that the Attorney General is supposed to do, and what I'll do with the office, crack down on welfare fraud, prosecute welfare fraud is one thing.
Sure.
So everybody's probably been following the story of child care subsidy fraud in the Somali community with daycare centers. That's something that the Attorney General is supposed to investigate and prosecute, while Swanson hasn't been doing her job. So that's one thing. We're also going to focus on election integrity. The Attorney General is supposed to enforce all of our laws, including our election laws. So we can do a lot to improve election fairness and integrity in Minnesota just by enforcing the election laws that we have. If sending the message that if you cast an illegal ballot intentionally in Minnesota, there's a good chance you're going to go to jail. We're also going to back up our county attorneys, make sure that they have the resources that they need to prosecute criminals, because our county attorneys are really the frontline prosecutors in the state. So that's really important, too. So the Attorney General affects so many different things. It's just a critical office. Yeah,
absolutely, and we appreciate that insight to that, Doug. I want to talk about, I guess, you personally, Doug. Obviously, during your day job, obviously you are legal counsel. It's something that you've made a nice career out of. What made you to decide to transition into politics, specifically this particular office, Doug?
Well, working with a group called Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a nonprofit Christian legal organization where we defend people's religious liberty and free speech and rights of conscience in cases across the United States, I saw how important states' attorneys general are to really upholding constitutional rights and standing up for the rule of law. And that's really what got me interested in running for Attorney General. And I was in the Minnesota House back in 2011 and 2012. And it's just absolutely apparent to me that we need to take back this office, the Office of Attorney General, if we're going to have any chance of really putting Minnesota back on a path to liberty and prosperity.
So in your time out on the road, Doug, and campaigning and talking with folks, what are those? Is it fair to say then those are some of the chief concerns they have? Is religious liberty, free speech? Obviously, if people are watching the news, as you alluded to, the daycare fraud, election integrity, are these something that you find Minnesotans are actively engaged in, Doug Wardlow?
Oh, absolutely. Once you start talking to folks, I've been doing this all over the state for over 250 campaign stops so far and counting, and people are really concerned about the government being defrauded to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, a year by these child care centers. And then a lot of that money is going overseas to money courier services called Hawalas. And at least one of those is affiliated with Al-Shabaab, a terrorist organization. So you have a situation because the Democrats didn't do their job on welfare fraud, and the Attorney General didn't prosecute welfare fraud. We have millions of dollars potentially going to terrorists every year, and so people are very concerned about that. They're very concerned about election integrity. They're very concerned about the safety of their families. Crime rates across Minnesota in different categories are going up, in Minneapolis and St. Paul, but then also across the state. We have a problem with human trafficking, drug-related crime, gang-related crime. And the Attorney General's office has not been taking the lead on those issues, partnering with law enforcement, making sure our county attorneys have the resources that they need to do their job and prosecute criminals. So the Attorney General's office, the Democrats in control for so long, they've dropped the ball. What they've been doing is basically suing the president. They've been playing political games with the office, and people are really concerned about that too. Lori Swanson recently sued President Trump to prevent him from putting a question on the census asking about citizenship, and there's no basis for that lawsuit. It's just it's a completely political lawsuit, a political exercise, and that's entirely inappropriate.
Doug, I want to switch, I guess, to the mindset now of the campaign as you're going forward. As you alluded to, obviously, this being a midterm election year, the general election coming up in November, but and a lot of people have spent a lot of time talking about the craziness, the chaos of the DFL side. But you specifically, you do have a couple of opponents in the GOP primary. So how are you as a mindset going into this particular election cycle? I know you're the endorsed candidate, and I know you feel confident you'll be there come November as the general election candidate. But how are you approaching this particular August primary? I know you're not taking anything for granted, Doug Wardlow, but how is your mindset kind of shifting at this point?
Right. I'm not taking anything for granted, and we're going to win the primary on August 14th, and it's important that everybody go out and polls and vote on August 14th. But I do have two challenges, but they're not really serious challengers.
Right.
I don't think they're going to mount serious campaigns. One gentleman's a former state representative. He's 87 years old, and I don't think he's going to be mounting a vigorous campaign. And then the other is a woman who has run several different races.
We call that a perpetual candidate, Doug Wardlow. Yes, I know who you're talking about.
A gadfly candidate, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So, but take things for granted. But I will be the candidate that wins the primary. Right, we do our work, which we're going to do, and then we're heading toward the general election. So we're really focused on the general election now, and making sure we get the word out that the Democrats, they're really feeling an extreme team of candidates, just hyper-partisan leftists led by Keith Ellison, who stepped down from Congress or is resigning from Congress in order to jump in the race. And he is just so far left and radical. We don't want him as our top law enforcement official in Minnesota.
Now, I know you were busy last weekend, Doug, at the Republican convention. Obviously, you running to be the endorsed candidate, which you obviously did attain. But were you kind of keeping informed or listening to what other folks were conveying about the DFL convention? Because I was broadcasting last Saturday, and I was watching the events via Twitter, and my eyes were almost popping out of my head, everything that was going on there. I mean, were you kind of keeping abreast of the details going on down in Rochester?
Oh, yes. Yeah, Brad, absolutely. I was, and the campaign was, and I was coming down off the stage after having received the endorsement and did a little press conference, and then right after that, I learned, somebody pulled me aside, and I learned that Lori Swanson had not won on the first ballot her endorsement at the DFL convention for Attorney General. And then shortly thereafter, we learned that she was bowing out, and then the rumors started flying that she was going to pull out and jump in the governor's race, which she then subsequently did. So quite a lot of interesting developments. And the Democrats endorsed Matt Pelican, who's an extreme left partisan who doesn't have a lot of experience being a lawyer.
I sense a theme here, Doug Wardlow, the extreme leftism on the DFL side for these statewide offices.
Yes, it is. They're really going off the deep end on the left side. It's quite remarkable.
Well, we are joined by Attorney General candidate Doug Wardlow. Again, he the Republican-endorsed candidate. Doug, we have a couple of minutes left in this segment. Are you able to hold over for another segment with us?
Sure.
Okay, fantastic. And Doug, before we go to a break, while people are listening to you, obviously we see a great opportunity for the first time in, like I say, my lifetime, for the Republicans to pick up this particular office. Why don't you give folks your website where they can find out where they can maybe donate some time, resources, what have you, and get this office flipped to the Republicans for once, Doug Wardlow.
Absolutely. So it's DougWardlowAG.com. It's Doug, and then WARDLOWAG.com.
Once again, that's DougWardlowAG.com. I've also linked to it at BradCarlson.org in today's post promoting the show. Doug, if you could hold, we'll be back. We'll take a break. We'll be back with another segment. I definitely want Doug to weigh in on the big ruling of the Supreme Court this past week. He alluded to Alliance Defending Freedom, for which he is legal counsel, and they were representing the plaintiff in this particular case for Masterpiece Cake Shop. Very intriguing case for religious liberty, to say the least. And we're here to take your phone calls, too, at 651-289-4488, or weigh in via Twitter at hashtag NARN Show. Brad Carlson, the closer, right here on the Northern Alliance Radio Network. Go nowhere.
Join Gene Sullivan each week on Where You Live, where he takes on Gene, who do you take on anyway?
Maniacal landlords, slippery renters, overbearing HOA boards, demanding homeowners. Oh, and the legislative lunacy brought on by local politicians wanting to fix everything for us.
It's a common sense perspective on the news and stories that affect you the most, right where you live. Join Gene Sullivan every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. on AM 1280, The Patriot.
Have you written a book and want to get it published? Christian Faith Publishing helps thousands of authors publish their books with a company dedicated to strong Christian values.
The most important qualities that I was looking for was a publisher who was honest and upfront, no hidden costs or fees, and owning the rights to my own work.
It all starts with our free author submission kit. Call 800-566-1012. We'll edit, design, copyright protect, print, and distribute books online and in bookstores everywhere. You'll see your books in Christian bookstores, Amazon, iTunes, Barnes & Noble, and many others. If you have a biography, novel, devotional, self-help, or other inspirational work, we get it published. We provide professional book editing, award-winning design, with the highest royalty structure in the industry. Plus, you retain 100% rights to your work. Get your book published today. Call for your free author submission kit at 800-566-1012. That's 800-566-1012. 800-566-1012.
Are you smart? Smarter than the 6th grade honors student highlighted on that crooked bumper sticker you just passed? Then you're probably already a Smart Club member with Standard Heating. Standard Heating's Smart Club is the most affordable way to maintain your heating and cooling equipment year-round. Standard Heating's NATE-certified technicians make regular visits to help you identify and prevent potential problems. As a Smart Club member, you get priority status in an emergency, and you're eligible for Saturday and evening appointments. Plus, if you ever need a repair, you'll save 10%. No matter the age of your equipment, Standard Heating offers a variety of options to make it easy on your budget. Getting stuck without heat is not a story you want to recall at your family's holiday dinner. So join the Standard Heating Smart Club, and then you can create your own bumper sticker honoring your intelligence. For complete details, visit standardheating.com/patriot. Standard Heating, providing the comfort you deserve since 1930.
Step into Chet's Shoes in Columbia Heights for work, hiking, hunting footwear, and more.
Check out our expanded line of women's work boots and our selection of New Balance shoes.
Ready to ride this season?
Be sure to check out our Harley-Davidson motorcycle boots.
Don't forget, Chet's carries other essentials such as socks and inserts.
Let us help you find the right footwear and the right size.
Stop in to see us in Columbia Heights and visit us at chetsshoes.com.
Remember, if the shoe fits, you've been to Chet's.
Welcome back to AM 1280 The Patriot. Northern Alliance Radio Network. Back with another segment of the broadcast we'd like to call The Closer. That's me, Brad Carlson, closing out this weekend's edition of Northern Alliance Radio Network programming. And here to take your phone calls at 651-289-4488. You can also weigh in via Twitter. That's hashtag NARN Show. That's hashtag NARN Show. Hashtag NARN Show for any comments or questions regarding today's show content. As always, we appreciate you tuning in. We are continuing our discussion with Republican-endorsed candidate for Minnesota Attorney General, Doug Wardlow. Again, check out his campaign website, Doug Wardlow. That's W-A-R-D-L-O-W, Doug Wardlow, A-G. .com if you'd like to be a part of the campaign. And this is getting the attention of some national Republican Attorney General groups, which they were otherwise hesitant to jump into this race. Now that the incumbent Lori Swanson is not seeking re-election for this office, the Republican National AG group is taking a very serious look at this election. So get on board, folks. It's a great opportunity, one we have not had in quite some time. Doug, I did want you to hang over for another segment because I didn't want to let you go without talking about the big ruling that was handed down, or at least announced, by the Supreme Court, who ruled in favor of Jack Phillips. He's the Colorado baker who refused to make a custom cake for a same-sex couple because he believed that doing so would violate his religious beliefs. And this is especially personal to you, Doug Wardlow, in that Alliance Defending Freedom actually sought or litigated this case on behalf of Jack Phillips to the Supreme Court. And it was a 7-2 ruling in favor of Jack Phillips. Now, a lot of the headlines that came out, Doug, and I want you to clarify this for our listeners, is a quantified it as a narrow ruling. Now, that's not in terms of the number of justices that voted in favor of Jack Phillips as much as the scope of the case and how they ruled on that. Why don't you clarify that for us, Doug Wardlow?
Well, absolutely. So it's a 7-2 win. It's a very significant victory. But I think what's being alluded to there is the fact that the ruling wasn't on the free speech clause of the First Amendment. It was what the court did is they held that the Colorado Civil Rights Commission applied the law in a way that targeted religion,
right,
and that violated the free exercise clause of the First Amendment. So they said that because the commission was hostile to Jack Phillips and his religion and treated him differently because of his religion compared to others sort of similarly situated cases, that violated the religion clause of the First Amendment.
And what should be alarming to everybody, and again, I don't know if hopefully this is just exclusive to the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. If there are other commissions out there who have these beliefs or other members, that's a pretty scary thing. But Justice Kennedy alluded to it that one commissioner even went so far as to compare Phillips' invocation of his sincerely held religious beliefs to defensive of slavery and the Holocaust.
Yes.
That's scary, Doug Wardlow.
It is scary, and I would not be surprised to learn that there are other civil rights commissions and folks in government, state government, that kind of hold similar views to that. That's not terribly uncommon in these kinds of cases to have facts like that, and that's why this is a significant win, because the Supreme Court is calling out folks that apply the laws with those kinds of motives and saying that that's inappropriate and it violates the free exercise clause.
Now, one of the rulings handed down by the Civil Rights Commission when this was first brought forth is they not only said, well, you not only have to sell or you use it wasn't even a sale of a tangible product per se, Doug Wardlow, but actually lending his services, which it wasn't. And this is what bothered me about this whole case as it was being litigated, is basically this same-sex couple was implying that the baker was saying, well, we don't serve your kind here, which was a total misrepresentation of his views, Doug Wardlow, because he denied he didn't want to make cakes for Halloween parties, witchcraft. There was even people have divorce parties now, as hard as that is to believe, and he wouldn't bake cakes for that. So this was definitely not an anti-gay thing.
No, it wasn't at all, Brad. And that's the thing. This was about whether the government could force Jack Phillips to basically participate in the celebration of a ceremony that directly conflicts with his religious beliefs. It had nothing to do with the sexual orientation status of the people that were asking him to do this. It was about his right to not participate in a ceremony that conflicts directly with religious beliefs. The person should be able to operate their lives and run their business in conformity with their sincerely held religious beliefs, and that's what the First Amendment protects.
So how do you see this impacting cases going forward? I mean, undoubtedly we're going to have probably similar cases, and a lot of the those who are maybe pessimistic that this is something that could have a positive impact on religious liberty cases in the future is the fact this happened in 2012 when obviously same-sex marriage was not the law of the land. It was far from settled from state to state until Obergefell ruling came down in 2015. So how do you personally see this impacting perhaps similar cases coming forward, Doug Wardlow?
Well, I think this is going to hopefully send a message, and I think it does send a message that to state governments, government bureaucrats, that they cannot target religion. They can't be hostile towards religion when they're applying any kind of law, and that's a good thing. But there are questions that remain to be litigated, of course, and the sort of the core free speech question remains to be decided. And there are cases in the pipeline where the court will take a look at those remaining questions.
Absolutely. Again, we are joined by Doug Wardlow. He, the Republican-endorsed candidate for Minnesota Attorney General. Again, check out his website, DougWardlowAG.com. That's WARDLOW, DougWardlowAG.com. Doug, obviously this is a case that was garnering some national attention. Another freedom of association, I guess along the lines of freedom of association, and one that my wife is paying rapt attention to, is obviously having to do with public employee unions compelling union dues. And I know this was a case that was brought while Justice Scalia was still with us, and unfortunately he passed away before the final decision was handed down, and that ended up being a 4-4 deadlock. Now, wasn't there a similar case in the pipeline recently where the decision is yet to be announced, if I have that right, Doug Wardlow?
There is a case that where the decision is yet to be announced on the question of whether union dues can be automatically deducted, and whether you can be forced to pay union dues as a condition of employment. That's right, Janice case.
Okay, and so if you can kind of are you at all familiar with that case, Doug? I mean, I hate to delve into an area maybe you're not.
I'm not terribly familiar. I haven't been paying very close attention to that one actually, but
okay. So, but kind of
it's a very important case, and it hopefully the court is going to have a significant ruling there, and it's going to limit the ability of. It's really a First Amendment case. The court will hopefully limit the ability of the government to require a person to pay union dues as a condition of employment and automatically deduct union dues from paychecks.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, that's something obviously like my wife being a public school teacher, something of which she's paying rapt attention to. So definitely something to keep an eye upon, that is for sure. We only have a few minutes. Again, our guest, Doug Wardlow, the Minnesota Republican-endorsed candidate for Attorney General. Doug, it's pretty obvious looking at the DFL side for all of their state offices that anyone that was even just lukewarm toward the Second Amendment and gun rights was pretty much being ostracized from the state party. And we're seeing at a national level anybody that is attacking gun rights, it's blowing up in their proverbial in their collective faces, particularly when you look at an organization like the National Rifle Association getting record memberships as a result of this. Mm-hmm. Now, for this particular for the Second Amendment and particularly gun rights issues here in the state, what do you see from the candidates on the DFL side of how they're going to go about this? I mean, like I say, we still have a Second Amendment, but the sentiment is there where if there is any way that they could possibly do things to undermine gun rights, they're going to handle it. So what do you see as perhaps the biggest danger to our gun rights if a Democrat assumes this office, Doug Wardlow?
Well, I think if a Democrat assumes his office, if it's extreme left-wing partisan, Keith Ellison in particular, no friend of the Second Amendment at all.
No.
So Keith Ellison and none of the candidates that are running on the DFL side for Attorney General are friends of the Second Amendment. And in fact, it was Lori Swanson's connection to, well, not really connection to, but early in her career, she received a favorable rating from the NRA.
Yes.
And that is one of the things that Matt Pelican used to attack her, and is partially responsible for her losing her party's endorsement.
Right.
So they're rabidly against gun rights, and they're rabidly against the Second Amendment. And so we just cannot have those kinds of people in the top law enforcement office in the state.
So what is there? Is there anything that you've heard, some of the actions that they might take if they assume office? Because obviously this is something that is getting obviously the collective attention of some of the prominent gun rights groups here in the state of Minnesota. Is there anything that they've said thus far as how they're addressing this? I mean, I know Matt Pelican kind of used that as a kind of a something to tie around Lori Swanson's neck, but I mean,
right.
What are they planning on doing?
Well, I know not specifically. It's hard to tell.
Sure.
I haven't heard a lot of specifics from them, but there's a lot of talk about restricting gun rights, and there's a lot of talk that the Second Amendment is responsible, they think, for gun violence, and that's just preposterous. And I think that we need to have an Attorney General who's going to stand up for our Second Amendment rights and all of our other constitutional rights too, right? I mean, and that's what the Attorney General needs to do is to enforce the rule of law, enforce all the laws, and then also stand up for and defend our constitutional rights, including the First Amendment, freedom of speech, religious freedom, rights of conscience, the Second Amendment, all of our rights.
And we do have a couple of minutes left, Doug. I one last thing regarding the actual campaign itself. I mean, we've talked about how the DFL has lurched so far to the left that it almost gives the impression they're not really all that concerned about outstate voters, despite the fact that the 2016 election was a definite referendum by outstate voters against the far left lurch that the Democrats have taken. What is your campaign strategy? Obviously, you're not taking anything for granted. Certainly outstate Minnesota, you'd probably have a lot more favorable opportunity than, say, your DFL opponent. But what about in the metro and within the cities? Because certainly you're not writing that off. And how do you appeal to voters within that particular demographic, Doug Wardlow?
Well, right. I mean, we're not writing any part of the state off, and we're campaigning all across the state. And, the Democrats really have become a very urban kind of centric party, and they do ignore Greater Minnesota, and we're not doing that. And in the Twin Cities area, we have a strong message there too, because that's where crime rates are rising, and particularly the core cities, and that's in part because Democratic attorney generals have not been backing up our county attorneys, have not been partnering with law enforcement, have not been leading the way on those issues on public safety. And I'm going to change that. We're going to make sure that county attorneys have the resources that they need to prosecute criminals, get them off the streets, and keep people safe. So we have a message that for all of Minnesota.
Once again, we've been joined this past couple segments by Doug Wardlow. Doug, I know you've got a Facebook page. People just look up Doug Wardlow for Minnesota Attorney General. That's WARDLOW. They can find you on Twitter, I'm assuming. Once again, if you want to give the folks your website, because I know hearing you, they feel confident that this could be a statewide victory for Republicans for the first time in nearly 50 years. So why don't you give them your website once again?
Absolutely, yes. It's DougWardlowAG.com.
Once again, DougWardlowAG.com. And I've also linked to it at BradCarlson.org. And Doug, forgive me, it must have been a gross oversight on my part. I hadn't liked your Attorney General Facebook page until right when we were talking. So I've rectified that wrong, Doug Wardlow. So
all right, well, thank you very much.
I'm back in your good graces,
Very good.
I hope. Doug, we appreciate your time on the broadcast today. Again, we'll look forward to seeing you out on the campaign trail. And you have an open invitation to come back on the Northern Alliance Radio Network whenever you'd like. We'd love to help you tout your candidacy, and whatever we can do to help you. That's why we're here, Doug Wardlow, so thanks again.
All righty. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brad. Have a great day.
AM 1280 The Patriot, Northern Alliance Radio Network, back with another segment.